Hi, and welcome to episode 53 of the Give Me a Crown Knitting, Spinning and Bits and Pieces podcast. Today is Monday the 10th of October 2016, and my name's Nina, also known as Give Me a Crown on Ravelry, Instagram, Pinterest, and it's also the name of my Etsy shop. I'm coming to you from the central west of New South Wales in Australia, and it's lovely to have your company. This week I don't have any spinning, but I do have a knitting finished object as well as a few works in progress and just a little bit of chatter at the end. But I think this might be another shorty little episode, but let's get on with it. So, my finished object is my Isla top. So I can't quite get it into frame, but it's a little bit damp still, so I can't model it and I haven't had a chance to take photos of it yet, but I'm so happy to have it finished. Last week I was working on this section, which is the Tawny Owl colourway in Holston Coast, and then I worked on the lace. I bound off with a bit of the blue and then did the neck and the armbands. So this is the Isla pattern by Isabel Kramer for Quince & Co, and I'm knitting it for the Give Me Colour knit along that's going on in the Give Me a Crown podcast group on Ravelry. So the idea was that I would use up a couple of skeins of Holston Coast that I'd picked up some time ago, and I've ended up using about 80 grams of yarn, and it's yarn that I'd had for a few years, so I'm planning to enter this in the What Shara Made podcast stash busting knit along that's going on all year. It's been a fantastic little inspiration for making sure that I get some of my older stash used up. What to say? So the lace was a little bit tricky just because of the yarn. So it's a merino and cotton blend with 45% cotton, and I found that it was a little bit tough going on the hands to work on the lace, and it's a fairly long stitch repeat, so I was having to look at the chart and sort of create little not jingles, there's a word for it, like little sing-songy sort of phrases in my head about what stitches I was knitting. One thing that I tend to do is, rather than think out slip, slip, knit or knit two together, I'll think left and right. So it might be knit two, left, knit two, right, yarn over, whatever. And just sort of trying to keep the little phrasing short in my mind. Once I'd gotten a few rows into the lace, I was able to read a bit of what was going on, and it helped check that I was always on track because I didn't put stitch markers in between the lace repeats because I don't have enough stitch markers. I found that the pattern overall, it was good. I mean, I ended up with a perfectly wearable top, but things like some of the instructions for the top section around the neck and the arms, and then around the lace, there's just tweaks that they could have written better just to prevent accidental mistakes or misreading an instruction. But I managed to get a top out of it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it as a first ever top if you haven't knit tops before, because it just expects a little bit from the knitter to know what they're doing. Once I had knit the lace, I did the bind off edge with the blue colour, and I think that I probably should have knit one row of blue before the bind off. I just did the bind off row. I'm a little bit worried that it's going to curl up, but I sort of played around with it when I tried it on, and it didn't seem to matter too much. If it just flips up a little bit on top of jeans or a skirt or something, I think it'll be fine. But next time I would put one row of the blue and then do the bind off, and it would just create a bit more of a border on the top. When I gave it a wash, I was a bit surprised that some of the water turned blue from the blue yarn. I'm not sure if that's common with Holskarn Coast, but it didn't seem to bleed into any of the other, into the tawny owl colour, so it didn't seem to be a big deal. But it's just a word of warning if you are knitting with Holskarn Coast that there might be a little bit of bleed, and it's definitely good to pre-wash and block a garment before wearing, just in case it wears off onto clothing. For the arm and the neckband, the pattern suggested using 3.25mm needles, but I didn't have 3.25mm needles, so I went down to a 3mm because the body was knit with 3.5, so I couldn't sort of go up. I went down, and so I'm not sure if that's going down a 0.25mm, 0.25 of a millimeter on a needle caused the armholes to shrink a bit more, but they definitely are smaller than when they hadn't had the band on them. I think that even if I'd have used the correct needle size, they would have shrunk a little bit, but I'm really happy with the size that they've shrunk to, so they don't sit too low in the armpit. Before adding the bands on, it had sort of draped a fair bit, and I was certain that I'd have to wear a tank top underneath it. Now, I'm not sure. It definitely doesn't sit too low on the side, but just the drapiness or the see-throughness of the fabric might mean that I need to still wear a tank top, but I'm fine with that. In the instructions it said to do the neckband by starting at the back of the neck, and it was a bit late at night when I was doing it, and I had the top on my lap, and I just sort of picked it up and looked, oh yep, this looks like the back, because it's got sort of short bits at the shoulders. Sort of figured out where the middle was and started doing the pick up row and the bind off row. It was only later I realised that I'd actually picked it up on the wrong side. So the start of my round is actually in the middle of the neck, which was a little bit worrying. I was worried that I'm going to get some strange noticeable effect in there, but I've managed to weave in the ends pretty neatly, so it's not obvious. There is on the wrong side where I've woven in the tail ends, you might be able to see that there's I wove in the ends diagonally there. Doesn't actually show up very much. I was a bit worried that that would be visible, but it hasn't been from what I can see so far. So if you do end up starting to bind off in the wrong spot on the top, then don't worry, it should be okay. So overall, fantastic little top. I like the way that it feels when I tried it on, and I'm looking forward to it drying properly now that I've re-blocked it after doing the bands and then getting some photographs of it. But I think it will be a fantastic summer top. Yeah. With the pattern, I think that it's a bit of a hard one to adjust to different yarns, because they use the yarn that gets tighter after blocking, whereas this particular yarn expands after blocking. So it just made for a little bit of pondering and wondering whether or not this was actually going to fit properly. So I think if you're confident with swatching and calculating and what have you, then by all means go for it. But otherwise, if you use the yarn that they've suggested, then that's possibly a less stressful sort of knit. But I'm definitely knitting it again. This top ended up just weighing about 80 grams. I haven't done the final measurements, but I looked at how much I had left over. So I think it's about 80 grams worth of yarn, which is quite amazing, because that's sort of the weight of a pair of socks sometimes. So it's the yardage on the Holskarn Coast is impressive. It is an airy fabric. You can sort of see my arm and my hand through the fabric when the light shines through, but once it's against the body, it'll be fine. But I'm wearing my Holskarn Super Soft top, which is another top that I knit a while back, and it's been a great top, so I'll be looking forward to having this whole Scarn Coast one in rotation. And I'll get photos of that onto Ravelry soon. I've got a huge pile of things that I've knit and I need to photograph, so hopefully I'll get onto that soon. I also have a few works in progress. So I've been knitting on my Echoes from Corellia socks. So this is a free pattern by Tina Cool, and I haven't made a huge amount of progress from last week, but I'll just sort of try to show you. At the moment it's in a huge tangle because I'm trying to knit 2 socks at once using the inside and outside of yarn balls and all sorts. So this is the leg of one sock. I finished the patterning and I'm going to then be doing a section with the grey, and there's some kind of cabling going on the leg, and then a heel and a foot, and then something similar to this gets repeated on the foot. So this is mainly yarn that I sort of randomly picked up in Finland, but also some Regia in there, and I really like the way that the Regia is actually knit up. I think it has a bit of a shine to it with the flecks of white in the grey, so it's a nice look, and I'm really happy with how these are looking there. It's a bit of a different colour combination option to the written pattern, but they sort of have a bit more of a, I don't know, a woodsy feel, so I can imagine going camping wearing these socks. So I started the second sock, which is in a bit of a tangle. So after I'd knit the first sock up to the end of the colour work, I used my smaller needles to start the second sock. Then I, one by one, switched a needle out from one sock to the other so that I could get my slightly larger needles onto the colourwork section here and knit the first round of the rest of the leg here. And it was very fiddly, sort of trying to jump between from one sock to another after each needle, but it was worth it. I've now got 2 socks on the go, so I'm working on this one. I'll get all the colour work done, then I will get this section of leg done to wherever I next need to switch over needles, do the switcharoo again, and that the reason I'm doing that is because my gauge tends to change as I get through a pair of socks. So my second sock tends to be a little bit tighter gauge than the first, and I don't know whether that's because I'm trying to get it finished and I'm really excited about the finished product, or I just get into rhythm and that causes a tighter gauge. But by doing it this way, I should have sort of similar gauges at similar parts of the socks. So the tops will be perhaps a looser gauge, and then once I get towards the toes I'll have a slightly tighter gauge, but on both socks the changes will be in approximately the same place. So we'll see how it works out. I think I've tried it out before and it seemed to end up with similar size socks, so that will be fun to play around with. I've also actually been watching my mum knitting away on her socks, and we were sort of comparing our colour work techniques and where we tension our yarn. So I have the yarn going over in between my 2 knuckles on my finger. She actually has it going over almost the tip of her finger, and she says that helps her knit faster. So I've been trying to shift it and sort of do a bit more. I sort of have my finger fairly straight and she has it a bit crooked. So I've been trying to adjust my tensioned finger to be a bit more crooked, but my yarn keeps slipping off my finger. But I think it's interesting to watch other people knit and give it a try. It might not work, it might need a bit of practice, or it just might not work at all, but it can be helpful every now and then just to sort of look at your technique and sort of make adjustments. I don't know whether we compared fingers, and my fingers are a different shape to my mum's. I have longer fingers and they're a little bit holy, so holy fingers. She has slightly plumper fingers and I have long skinny fingers, so the yarn doesn't sort of sit in between my fingers in the same way as hers does. I sort of have a gap in here which makes the yarn slide through much faster than what I want it to at times, whereas her fingers can actually hold the yarn in place, if that makes sense. I might try to get some footage of my mum knitting soon and show you how she does it. I've also been working on my taskutakki, which is a cardigan that's designed by Veera Välimäki, and I'm using a Finnish book, but it's also available in the English Colour Wheel Knits book. And I forgot to put my point protectors on here, so we'll try not to drop any stitches, but it's still in a very wobbly stage that I showed a couple of weeks ago. So I had knit one pocket on this side, and this is a cardigan if I didn't say so, and I'm working on the second pocket. So the second pocket has a little bit further to go, and then I start filling in sort of the central section, which will be sort of the I'm not too sure what the central section is. It basically fills in the pockets, so I'm not sure if I'm sort of going sort of from down up for a little while, or I should read the pattern, shouldn't I? But it was interesting trying to work on two different tops at the same time. I realized that my brain sort of didn't want to switch between the projects as easily, so that's why this one took a rest for a few weeks, and I've now picked it up and I'm having to try to remember what I was actually doing, where my decreases were, and even though I had marked them out, thankfully I'd written a few notes about what I was doing and why I was doing it, so I don't have to sort of sit there calculating. But yeah, I'm not sure I can knit two garments at once. I can knit two socks at once, I can knit a shawl and a top and socks and garments, but I don't think two garments is necessarily something that my brain wants to switch to, and I just find that, especially with different weight yarns, it takes a little bit picking up each project to sort of get back into the rhythm of it. So I think from now on I might just stick to one garment at a time, until of course I decide otherwise and pick up two. I have not made much progress on my Rose City Rollers socks, so maybe I can't do two socks at once either. But yeah, there hasn't been a huge amount of knitting time. I've been very much focused on my Etsy shop and getting lots of project bags in there for the upcoming holidays. So yeah, I think I should actually just finish off those Rose City Rollers. Maybe I'll do that tonight, and then they're done, and then I can focus on these other projects, and I'm really keen to cast on some other ones. So I'm rambling now. But yes, so that's it for my projects. No spinning, but hopefully soon I'll get my spinning wheel happening again. But I thought that I would show what my mum's been up to. So last week I showed a pair of her colourwork socks, and in the past week she has knit almost 3 more pairs of socks, so she's just got the toe to go on her 3rd pair of socks, but I'll show you the 2 that she has finished. So she has been diving around in the stash, and she just wanted to knit socks, so she found this yarn. It's purple, it's coming up a little bit more blue on screen, but this is a Finnish Novita yarn called Seitsemän veljestä, or 7 brothers, and it's a self-striping or self-patterning yarn, and she just wanted to knit some more socks. So I'm not entirely even sure what she did here. It's got a 1x1 rib up the top. She's actually done some I think that's garter stitch up the top, and then the 1x1 rib, and then everything else is pretty standard on there. So she got those done, and then she had some of the leftover yarn, and she saw my broken seed stitch socks, so she knit these. So the colour in there is actually this, but the combination with the green yarn has sort of muted the purple down so that it looks almost grey. So there's grey stripes in there, and then sort of the patterning, this sort of section going on, and then the feet are kind of interesting, a bit more interesting on the second one. So she's been using up lots of scraps, getting rid of colours that, like this green was one that I had a huge ball of and couldn't figure out what to do, so definitely reducing my stash, but reducing it at a very, very fast rate. This grey was one that I've also used on some socks before, and so she's got a third pair of socks almost finished, and then I've got to find her some more yarn, and we might run out of yarn soon. But no, there's plenty of yarn to go around, and but I'm not even sure why she's knitting so many socks. I know that the ones that she's doing at the moment are for a friend, but I don't even know who these are for. She just wanted to knit and wanted to try out the broken seed stitch pattern. But I would never have thought to combine the purple with the green. So, fascinating. That's it for all the knitting chatter, apart from the Give Me Colour knit along, which is currently going on in the Ravelry group. So it is running until the 31st of October, which happens to be a Monday. So I'm actually thinking that it might be useful to continue it on until the following Sunday, which is the 6th of November, and that way I can draw it on the following Monday, because I wouldn't want to cut it short when I record on the Monday of the 31st. So let me know if you're happy for it to run through until the 6th of November. That'll give everyone a little bit more time, but otherwise there's about 3 or 4 weeks to go, so plenty of time to cast on a pair of colourwork socks or a stripy shawl or something like that if you want to take part. We have 3 prizes for the finished objects. One of them is a Stray Cat Socks self-striping yarn from New Zealand in the Audrey colourway. We also have a skein of yarn of the winner's choice from Black Stump Studio, and they kindly donated that. And also the Blossomfield pattern by Meg Gadsby that has been kindly donated by Cyberfrog. We also have a chatter prize, which is a very colourful snap project bag from the Give Me a Crown Etsy shop. So pop by the Ravelry group and have a bit of a chatter, or pop in your finished objects. We've had lots more finished objects popping up, which is great, and I love to see all the different types of colour work that people are giving a whirl, and they're coming out with some amazing projects. Apart from that, I spotted a lizard the other day. There seems to be a local lizard in the garden, and sort of been finding it. I think we've bumped into it 3 times so far, and I got a little bit of video. It was underneath a rock, so it's a little bit hard, but I'll see if I can pop that video in at the end. I think it's probably about that big. That might be about 40-50 centimeters. Not too sure what that is in inches, but a lot. It's chunky and looks very, very happy living in the rocks. Not much else to report. It's just been busy, lots of sewing, trying to get as much knitting done as possible, but sewing at the moment is a bit of a priority. So I'll leave it there, and I hope that you're well, and I hope that you're getting lots and lots and lots of knitting time, or crocheting time, or spinning time, or whatever fibre craft time you enjoy. And thank you for watching. It's always nice to get comments and questions, and I'll see you soon.